Hello, Seekers on YouTube. Hello, Seekers. Hello, Seekers on Facebook. This is a live video. We're going to be chatting today about Beltane, the reason for the season, and some suggestions for rituals that are social distancing, pandemic, quarantine, etc., friendly. Just trying to get Instagram set up here too. Gosh, I am struggling. Hey folks on Instagram, hello Seekers, this is Avani, and I am here today. We're going to be chatting about Beltane, the reason for the season, and some ritual ideas. I'm just going to hang out here for a couple minutes and eat my really healthy snack while I wait for folks to show up. Usually I give it 5 to 10 minutes. So if you're watching this on the replay, number one, please make sure to hashtag replay. And Jesus, it's so rude. If you want to skip ahead to the 10-minute mark, you probably won't miss much of anything. Unless you really want to hear me sit here and talk to myself. To my fancy new backdrop. Well, new to you guys. I call this my apothecary table, which I don't actually really use. It really is just a repository for all of my fancy bottles and stuff. And that's my artwork right there. And then this one on this side, which only some of you can see, is made by Madame Cabot's Victorian Lowbrow. She's on Instagram. She has on Instagram. I love her artwork. I found that post from Salem. Super inspiration goes with artwork. Her and Poison Apple Print Shop. Poison Apple Print Shop, if you're not familiar with them already on Instagram. They are awesome. Okay. I'll open myself on Facebook. On Instagram. They are awesome. Okay. Hi, Sarah. I got one. Sarah, we are just waiting for some other folks to join us before I start jumping into all the fun stuff afterward. I know you've always wanted to just watch me snack. Sarah, I saw that you were dyeing your hair the other day. What color are you now? Hi, Jess Caribbean Queen. Just waiting to make sure that no one else is joining us before I get too far. I'm snacking because I was starving. Last bite. All right. Super fun. Gonna give it about 5 more minutes and then I'll start talking about the stuff that people actually came here to see. Very blonde, Sarah says. Are you intending on putting a color over the blonde? Yeah, no kidding, Jessica. It is a struggle. Like such a struggle. Hey, Ariel. Just gonna give it like 5 more minutes to see if anybody else shows up. Oh, what kind of tarot card deck? Sarah says she's been playing with her tarot cards. What tarot deck do you have that you're playing with, Sarah? Hi, Daniela. We're giving it about 5 minutes to see if more folks join us. No, not yet. I think Sarah says in regards to dyeing her hair a different color. No, not yet. Are you going to, or are you just kind of enjoying being blonde for a little while? For folks on Instagram, Sarah is one of my clients in my day job, as it were, who is also following me on Instagram for all my witchy stuff. So yay. 4 minutes. Then we'll start talking about Beltane and ideas for Beltane rituals that are social distancing friendly. Rider weight, Sarah says. It's with an I. You spelled it right the first time. Cool. I'm just letting my hair fade out. And when it gets to be such an ugly color, I can't stand it. I'm going to, like she says, next time purple, I'm going to put more purple back in my hair. And actually, I'm going to I have a little bit of pink. I'm going to put pink on these long ends. So it'll be hopefully like an array from like purple to some like bubblegum pink. We'll see. It's going to be an adventure. That's the hair dye I already have in my cabinet that I just need to use. Hey, Artisan Jewelry. Nice to see you. We are just giving it about 3 minutes to see if more folks show up before I start talking about Beltane. Everyone on Facebook you can't see, I have a mug of tea. I'm not like, doing anything crazy over here. YouTube. So I've got YouTube and Instagram and Facebook. For any folks that are in here, if you could do me a big favor, give me a hashtag live, that'd be great because that'll help other folks that are on the internet right now find us here. Please, thank you. 2 minutes. Sometimes I wish I had the Jeopardy theme so I played in the background. It's still pretty hot. And not at all steeped. It's supposed to be cinnamon. I'm disappointed. How's the baby, Danielle is asking me on Facebook. The baby is excellent. He is currently napping on his dad. But he is wonderful. He is starting to sit up. And then he makes all kinds of fun cooing noises. And he reaches and grabs for anything that he can that's within his, radius of reach, and plenty of things that aren't actually. Especially my phone. He likes to eat that. Thankfully, I have possession of it currently because that's what my Instagram is streaming on. And it's still working, so the baby slobber hasn't destroyed it yet. So that's good. 1 minute to go, and then I'm going to jump into the fun stuff. People usually kind of pop in and out as we go, so thinking maybe in the future I might not do this 10-minute thing. Seems like people, oh, hey, Freedom! We're giving it another less than a minute for more folks to show up. We're going to talk about Beltane and some suggestions for how you can celebrate it, social distancing friendly. Kind of excited. This is when I started doing this was like one of my very, very first ideas. So finally going to get to do it. Stoked about it. All right, it's 4:10. Let's jump right in. All right. So let's talk a little bit about Beltane and why people celebrate it and why it's such a big holiday. When for the folks that came from a Christian background, I'm sure you're familiar with the idea of Christmas and Easter people. Well, in the witchy community, we have Beltane and Samhain, like really big holidays. And if you're not familiar with, if you didn't already know that, you might be like, well, why? Like, what difference does it make? Here I am about to tell you. So in the ancient Celtic belief system, they actually only had 2 seasons in their year. Hi, Kelly. Glad to see you folks on Facebook. In the ancient Celtic belief system, they had only 2 seasons in the year instead of 4. And they viewed anything that was a transition, be it a day or a location, like doorways, entrances, and of course, obviously, days that were kind of like in between places or times to be especially sacred. Hey, Emmanuel, nice to see you. So the Celts found these in-between spaces, in between days to be really, really sacred to them. So the in-between days that were in between the transition from summer to winter and from winter to summer are what we... Oh, thank you for the compliment, Emmanuel. He was just saying I look nice. Thank you. I straightened my hair for you today. It was easier than curling it. I got lazy. So the transition from summer into winter is Samhain, and the transition from winter into summer is Beltane. I think I just said that right. But obviously, one of them is in May, and at the end of April, beginning of May, and the other one is at the end of October, beginning of November. And at these kind of in-between times, the Celts believed that the veil between our world and the next world was especially thin, which meant that beings and spirits had the ability to come and cross it and come visit. At Samhain, the focus tends to be on ancestors, but at Beltane, the focus tends to be more on nature spirits and fairies, and kind of a cool story about those two things. Well, why one at one time and one at the other? Actually, forever ago, when all this was being celebrated originally, they believed that fairies were the spirits of those who had passed on, which is kind of cool. And my personal opinion, I can't, this is based on nothing other than, education, an educational guess, that in the springtime in May, they were focusing on nature spirits and fairies because those things are also associated with nature and flowers and things like that, as opposed to in the October-November timeframe, everything is starting to die. Things are starting to go away. Winter is right around the corner. So that's kind of why they were focused on one more than the other. So most often in the ancient Celtic practice and belief, Beltane was actually a huge fire festival. So it's very much associated with the element of fire. There are a lot of Sabbats that people mistakenly think are associated with fire, which I think is actually wishful thinking because everybody loves fire. Beltane is definitely very much a fire festival. In fact, it actually means, the word Beltane actually means bright fire, which is kind of cool. And fire in those particular ancient agrarian societies represented the sun, or the power of the sun, and it returning to power as the days were growing longer and things were starting to grow, and so on and so forth. And it was most common that during these fire festivals, one of the big things they would do is, yes, Jessica sent me some fire emojis, lots of fire. So they would use bonfires for purification. And one of the most common things that they would do is that they would line up all the cattle. And, well, not in this order, but they would have 2 bonfires lit. And they would line the cattle up and they would walk them between the fires. And they would use that as a purification ritual. In modern Wicca and paganism, we've kind of had our own slant to it in a way. Modern Wicca witchcraft actually has its own mythology that's not based on anything specifically that's ancient per se. It's really just based on the agricultural calendar and all the associated themes that are within it. It sort of is a way of personifying the cycles of nature. And in that mythology, at this point in the yearly cycle, also called the Wheel of the Year, if you're not familiar, it was believed that the god who was originally reborn at the winter solstice has now matured to the point that he becomes what's referred to as the horned god, and he actually will impregnate the goddess, ensuring that he is born again at the winter solstice, which is some kind of weird meta thing, which is reminding people that it is mythology, it's story, it's symbolic, so don't think too hard about it. But so because this is associated with the god reimpregnating the goddess, it is in every way, shape, and form, for the most part, unless you're celebrating with children and kind of taking a different path with it, a fertility holiday. Sometimes more literally than others, depending on how you choose to celebrate. So I really want to talk about Beltane today with a little bit of notice because Beltane's about a week away and people like to plan ahead. I want to talk about it because I feel like, because it's a fertility holiday and there's so much to do with the combination of masculine, the feminine, the god and the goddess, and a lot of the activities that are commonly used to celebrate the holiday are based around physical proximity and being close to each other. And, like even like if you think about the maypole dances, obviously you start pretty far away from one another, but the closer, the shorter the ribbons get, the closer you get. Like by the end of it, you're all like on top of each other. And obviously we can't be doing that right now. So I was hoping that I could do this video to kind of give some people some inspiration. And just so you guys know, I do have a cool ritual that I wrote myself that I hand illustrated, and the font is actually made from my own handwriting. So it's really personal to me and I'm really excited about it, but I wrote that and it's available in my shop. So if you really don't want to do any planning and writing, or that's not your strong point, I did all the work for you. If you're interested in that, you can go to on Instagram, you can go to my profile and sign up for my email list and get a coupon with a link to my shop. It'll give you 20% off. So that's cool. If you're on Facebook, it's linked from the information tab on my page, and YouTube, the link will be in the comments below. So let's get to the fun ritual ideas for all of you guys. Assuming that you don't want to do that, maybe you want to plan on your own, or you're really into writing your own rituals, because I am, obviously. So let me throw some ideas out at you, and if anybody has any comments, please add them. I love hearing from you guys. So the first thing I want to talk about is the idea of tree dressing. So tree dressing was a really common ritual that was done, I think, especially in England, if I'm remembering correctly, and what tree dressing is. And there's lots of different types of dressing that people do in different rituals, depending on different time of year, different holidays. But the idea is the dressing involves usually tying ribbons around tree branches, like at Lammas or Lunasa, or as my friends like to call it, lasagna, which I think is really funny. So, you know that now. It's really common to do well dressing, so dress wells, or sometimes fence posts, etc., etc. So if you don't have a tree, you could theoretically use fence posts, or you that only has, a yard, you could get a stick and tie a ribbon to it. That's fine too. This is, everything that I say can probably be adjusted to fit whatever your particular situation is. But moving on from that, so the idea of tree dressing, usually when you're tying the ribbons on the trees, two different things. One of them is either as an offering, or you can do it as a wish. So the idea is when you're tying the ribbon on the tree, the wind is going to catch it. One, it's going to look pretty. Yes, Ariel says our friend Megan in particular calls it lasagna. Yes, this is true. So it's flowing in the wind and it looks pretty. And that's kind of the offering portion. But the wind, the idea is also catching it and carrying your wishes up to the sky, to the goddess, to the god, or both. The other thing that you can think about is you could, everybody, can I help you? I have a child across from me. Okay. Go play outside.
I was.
She's bored.
What does it look like? I want to know.
Okay. No, it doesn't. All right. So the other thing you can do with trees, other than it's still a version of dressing. No. It's still a version of dressing, but kind of a spin on the idea of the sacred marriage. You can actually, if you have a big enough yard that you have space to do this, or like I said, you can use 2 sticks if you're really hard up and you like this idea, but you don't have the space for it. You can even do it on your altar, or you could use plants instead of trees. But the idea is that you dress one as the god and one as the goddess, and you can do a marriage ceremony for them. And the idea in marrying them together is that they are going to create a sort of creative force to help manifest whatever your intention is. So that's fun. So you could do a sacred wedding. That could be especially nice, especially if you're solitary. And if you don't have small children, that you're also actually that said, small children might actually love to dress up a tree. I think that sounds like a lot of fun, or a plant, or a stick, or what have you. But it would definitely be really nicely adapted to do alone, solitary, in a room. You could stick a couple sticks in a pot with dirt in it and decorate them and do it however you like. Some other ideas are to invoke the energy of the snake. So the snake is actually another fertility symbol. Think about the imagery of the snake burrowing underground. Use your imagination. I'm not going to go too much further with that. Hi, Renee. Nice to see you. Glad you made it. We were just talking about some Beltane ritual ideas we just talked about. Oh, Jessica just asked if there are particular colors to use for ribbon. Yes and no. Number one, I would say because we're all in quarantine. You just shook the table, please be careful. But if you're in quarantine, obviously you might not have a ton of options available to you. The colors are not like monumentally important. But that said, the traditional colors to use are usually red and white. Red representing the feminine, if you want to get specific, menstrual blood, and white representing the male. I'm going to let you guys figure that one out because I have a child sitting across from me. So you could also use green, which is a color of fertility, or the idea of the 1 + 1 = 3. The male plus the female creates a new entity or a new thing. I said the idea of 1 + 1 = 3. So, but you could use any colors you want. You could use pink for fertility and love. You could use red for passion. You could use any color will work, honestly. But those are the traditional colors, are red and white. So going back to the idea of the ritual, the snake energy ritual. So snakes are a fertility symbol. This would be a much better ritual, obviously. But obviously, snakes are a symbol, in addition to being fertility symbols, are also a symbol of healing. Think about the caduceus, or the sermons of Hermes, symbol of Hermes, or you see it in a lot of medical logos, which is the staff with the 2 snakes twining around it. So also it's a symbol of healing, which I think is really nice right now in general, but also, all right. I love you guys. You cannot be down here.
There's a bug on one of my blankets, and it was straight and not sleep. What are you?
I hope you can all hear that my 5-year-old is freaking out because there's a bug on our blanket upstairs. I can't help you. Go ask Phoenix.
Outside!
They live outside. Okay?
Well, I asked River.
You guys?
I don't want to! I don't want to touch anything with bugs on it!
I love you. You need to go somewhere else. That's why I came down here today, so you guys would not interrupt me. River, go help her. Hi, Ernest Hampton. Nice to see you. Glad you came. Let me get back to this snake ritual. So again, something that works much better as a solitary thing because it involves getting undressed. Snakes are associated with healing, and they're associated with healing. And obviously, when you think about a snake, I'm glad Jessica is entertained by my children. They're a symbol of rebirth and renewal. If you think about the idea of a snake literally shedding its skin. So the idea is in this ritual, Sarah says she hates bugs too. It's funny, Sarah, because Aurora loves to dig in the dirt, but hate bugs. Figure that one out. So in this particular ritual, if you're kind of tapping into the idea of the snake energy for your ritual, one where you actually ritually get undressed, it would be a really great opportunity if you have new robes or new ritual clothing that you kind of want to break in or consecrate in ritual. This would be a great opportunity. So you can kind of put on something itchy and gross that you don't like that much, take it off. If you have a fire burning, you can certainly actually burn the clothing and then put on the new thing as a symbol of your own renewal and rebirth and for healing. So that's one idea too. The other thing that is really common, Ernest says he's in Dallas. Hey, I am in Connecticut, which is half a country away from you. Hopefully in Dallas, things are pretty good and your government is doing things to keep everybody safe. Some states better than others. I have a sibling-in-law, that is in Texas, and I worry about them frequently. So hopefully you are doing well and being safe. So at Beltane is very much associated with youth and beauty rituals. Another thing that you can do, which this is really nice and low key. Ernest says it's hot in Texas. Yes. Well, I've been hearing, totally off subject for a second, but I've been hearing that, I don't know if it's humid down there, but that the humidity helps to deter the virus. So hopefully it's humid down there on top of being hot, because that's good for everybody. Not your comfort, for your health at least. So youth and beauty rituals. This can be a fun thing to do if you have little kids, especially if they're the type of little kids that are up at like the crack of dawn. One common tradition is that people would actually collect May dew and use it as a facial cleanser. The idea was that it would keep you eternally beautiful and youthful. Or you can use it to make potions or anything. But much like full moon water is considered to be a very magical substance. So you can make whatever you want out of it. But that's a thing that you could totally use too. And then I mentioned earlier that Beltane is very much associated with nature spirits and fairies. I assume that at least some of you might know or remember that I used to actually run a fairy festival that I loved and was super fun, but it was a lot of work, so I kind of had to let it go. Renee says that she misses my store and it was her favorite place to escape to. Well, I know this isn't exactly the same, but I hope that this is nice too, and I'm always happy to answer questions and chat with people if they have questions about stuff. So, not exactly a place, but still a place. So I hope that you feel comfortable and happy here too. So going back to fairies, my fairy festival. To me, this time of year is all about fairies. Some people associate them more with Midsummer, which I think is kind of to do with the whole Shakespeare Midsummer's Night Dream. I associate them a little bit more with Beltane. You keep hitting the table and making everything go sideways. So Sarah says she went to the fairy festival. Yes, me too, as you might imagine. So again, fairies, so it's super fun if you've got little kids and you've got a family. It's a great opportunity to dress up and put on some wings, especially if you have them handy, or make wings if you want. Hey, Witches of Selena, nice to see you. We were just talking about using Beltane to honor the Fae. As a real quick note, before I dive too far into that, I want to say something about working with fairies. Renee says she went to the fairy festival too. Fairies can be mischievous little buggers, and if you do not respect them properly, sometimes they can be jerks. They don't look at it that way, of course. Fairies have a very different set of ethics and morals as humans do. I generally, as a rule, this is more about honoring them. You don't necessarily want to call on them because that's sort of like inviting mischief in a way into your life in a way that you may or may not be ready for. So unless you work with fairy energy on a really regular basis, I don't really recommend calling them in. But to honor them or make offerings to them, totally safe. They like it when you give them stuff. River, you keep bumping into the table. Ooh. Yes. All right. So, the way that you could honor the fairies, I'm thinking of offerings, which if you're curious, things that the fairies like for offerings are things like honey. Honey is a really standard offering for lots of things. Interestingly, honey is also a really common offering for ancestors, which again makes sense in light of the idea that once upon a time they believed that fairies were the spirits of those that have passed on, so that makes a lot of sense. So honey is really common. Milk. Fairies obviously like pretty shiny things. So if you have things that are obviously, biodegradable and safe to be putting outside, you could always make offerings of shiny things. If you do choose to invite the fairies in, caramels work well too. Ernest says that makes a lot of sense because it's sweet. I would just be careful about what additives might be in it that may or may not biodegrade or be good for the earth. If you do choose to invite fairies into your circle, in spite of my warning, you should, and even if you don't, just to be on the safe side, you should always have at least one piece of cast iron inside of your circle. Cast iron actually repels fairies, and if you have one on your body, they actually, the superstition or the belief is that they can't take you. Fairies have a long history in storytelling of taking people and bringing them to the fairy realm. And time doesn't really work the same way there, so it might seem like you're only in the fairy realm for an hour, but you're actually gone for a year or something crazy like that. Obviously, there are no modern accounts of that, but I figure it doesn't hurt to be safe rather than sorry. And it's really easy to have a piece of cast iron in your circle because most cauldrons are made of cast iron. So if you have a cauldron of cast iron in your circle, you're probably safe. If you weren't already planning on having one in there, I would definitely include it. Other than that, things you can do, you can create a May garland, which, like a garland, or that's a wreath technically, but you get the idea. And you can actually wear it to dance with the fairies. Fairies are all about flowers. A note about picking flowers or using sticks or anything that's growing. You never want to take anything like that without permission. You always want to ask. Oh, my husband's watching. I feel so honored. All right. He's upstairs with the baby on him. So apparently he decides this is a good way to pass this time. So wary fairies, anytime that you are using something from nature, be it a rock, a stone, a flower, whatever, it's always a good idea to ask. And another thing, it's always a good idea to come or bring an offering. So you always want to have an even exchange of energy, basically. Common things to use for those types of offerings are tobacco, which is common to the indigenous people of this area, which is not really surprising since tobacco grows the way it does, or at least where I am. I will totally check out your dream catchers later, Ernest, after my live feed. Thanks. Unless they have cast iron in them, which would be really, really kind of cool story. Where was I? Tobacco, really commonly used by indigenous people, at least in my area. Other things that are common to use, especially down south, like down in Texas. Cornmeal is used a lot. Other things you can use, this is one thing that I like, bird seed. Like if you have sunflower seeds in your house, you can just use those because the birds eat them. So the idea is that we're giving something to the earth so that we can take something. And as far as asking, how do you ask for something? Cotton candy works good. It could. Again, it has a lot of artificial stuff in it, so I would worry about it a little bit, but maybe, especially if there's no coloring in it. It'd probably be okay either way, but that's a fun idea. Especially if you can make it yourself. I have no idea how you do that, but that would be very cool to use cotton candy. Where was I? So in order to ask for something, if you want to use it, Ernest says he's used pink cotton candy on Instagram. So that makes sense. Usually comes in pink or blue. Either way, I think would totally work. Again, I feel like when you're planning a ritual or you're doing a ritual, it's less important to have exactly what's on the supply list and more important to use what you have on hand. If you don't have honey, but you have cotton candy for some reason, then use that. If you have maple syrup and you don't have honey, use that. Anything that you have on hand can work in the right context. Yes, if it's sweet especially, but anything could work. If you're looking for things, again, some things that are generally universal for offerings as like for the dead, garlic, onion, other things like that. But if we're talking about fairies, I would stick with the sweet stuff. I love you. No, I have that there so I can see the comments. Please go over there.
The Lily Polly, I don't want to.
Can you please go help her water?
I'm telling her all she needs to do is
She doesn't want to do it. She doesn't like to touch bugs. Can you please go help?
I'm telling her.
Your father is calling me. Thank you. Okay, see? It really helps that my husband's watching upstairs. Hi, Brian. I know everyone that's Too Bad Guy. He's my uncle. It's so nice to see you. I'm really glad that you're here too. On Instagram. Let's see. Where was I? Asking for things from nature to use. How do you ask? Basically, you sit with the item, obviously without picking it if it's something that's still alive. Ideally, you want to use items that have already, like for branches that have already fallen off the tree. And for flowers, obviously, it's always a good idea to ask. But you sit with the thing and you kind of hold it in your hand or just near it or kind of, face your palms towards it and just ask in your head or out loud if you're comfortable doing so. And listen. And, the answers don't necessarily come in words, but they come. If you listen hard enough, it could be a feeling of warmth in your palms. It could be a feeling of love or positive energy kind of washing over you. Alternatively, if the answer is no, you might get the clear sensation of, back off or leave me alone. It's subtle, but if you pay attention, the answers are absolutely there. And just use your intuition. So as far as, those types of things. If you are kind of looking to make some of these ideas and use more than one, like if you're looking for sticks or trees, and you're also going to be using the fairies in your ritual in some way, shape, or form, some trees that are associated with fairies in particular are ash, hawthorn, rowan, oak, walnut, and apple. So if you have any of those around you, those can be particularly nice to use. So some other ideas, last idea that you can use at home particularly is a fire ritual. Obviously, if you live in an apartment building or in a dorm room, you probably can't, your ability to have your actual fire might be a little bit limited. There are, of course, ways around that. Obviously, if you have candles can work too. If you have a small cauldron, you might be able to get away with building a really tiny fire inside of it. But if you have one of those crazy overactive smoke detectors, like I've had in almost every place I've lived, proceed with caution. And obviously, I mentioned that I have that ritual that I have in my shop. I also made a Beltane ritual fire oil, which you can also find in my shop, which is a really great solution for people who want to have that energy of fire in their ritual, but can't actually have a real fire, built either in their yard or in their home. So that's an option too. Check it out. It smells really good, you guys. So in fire rituals, if you want to have a fire ritual at home, some things that you might want to do in your ritual is you could consecrate new tools or tarot decks. Or like I said, with the idea of the snake ritual, you could be consecrating some new ritual clothing or a robe. Like the other things you can do, if you have new pets, you might want to purify or consecrate them. Or if you have any new additions to your family, that would be a great time to take advantage of that too. And the way that you would usually do that, obviously, if you have your own property, you have a lot of space, you could literally build 2 giant bonfires and parade people or things or animals in between them. If you don't have that luxury, and most people don't, let's be honest, you could use candles, like I said. That's totally an option. If you can't even do candles, you could even get those little LED candles that are just electric. You can get those on Amazon, obviously. If you don't have those on hand, that might not be convenient for you. Also, of course, the oil, you could use it to anoint an item to represent fire also. Where was I? Right. So you could just, if you don't want to light 2 giant fires or 2 candles or 2 whatever, you could literally just pass something over the flame. Ariel says you can smudge with sage. Yes, but I would say, I guess because this is so much of a fire ritual, the thing with sage obviously usually is it's smoldering when you use it. It's not actually on fire, because when it is on fire, it like burns like that. I would be more inclined to use something that would actually stay inflamed, because it's going to capture more of the fire energy as opposed to something that just smolders. But again, in a pinch, using your intuition, if that's what feels right to you, go for it. Like I said, there's no real wrong answers. If that's what you want to do, if that's what feels right, you do you. And then another idea, which can be really, really fun. I put this under fire rituals in my Sweetgrass is Better, Ernest says. Okay, I have to bite Ernest. What makes you think that sweetgrass is better? Is it just because of the properties of it? Sage is usually about removing negative energy, and sweetgrass is usually more about drawing positive energy in. It's a very subtle difference, but it's there. I would think, because we're talking about cleansing and purification, that the sage would be better. If you're talking about ethically, okay, all right. He says yes. He was just agreeing with what I said. Again, if you have sweetgrass and that's what you want to use and that's what feels right to you, use sweetgrass. I find, and this is just a personal note, that sweetgrass is really hard to keep lit. So you might be better off burning that on a charcoal disc or something, because it's going to stay lit longer. But you do you. But real quick, we're going to talk about the ethics of sage, that there are some places where it's kind of over-harvested from New Age folk using it, much like we're talking about here. Better options are other things, of course, or things that you can get in the wild. The only downside is that if you get it in the wild, you have to have it hanging long enough to dry. So if you're not prepared ahead of time, that might not be an option for you. But like literally, if you have rosemary herbs in your cabinet and charcoal, you could use that. So that would work too. Or like if you have like sage herbs, you could use that. Again, it's whatever you have on hand can absolutely work. So I had a note here about, I put it under fire rituals, but you can kind of make it its own category. You could do a drumming ceremony. Again, some folks might remember that I used to host monthly fire circles, which were fire, drumming, dancing, which I think can be a really fun opportunity if you have kids again, because every child everywhere loves to make noise, all of them. If you don't have your own drums, you could use rattles. You could use pots and pans. You could make rattles. I'm sure we all did that thing when we were in school where we used dried beans and a paper plate, and glued them together and use that as a rattle. It could be a really fun opportunity to have some projects that you do as a family that you then use in ritual, which I'm a big fan of, for the record. I love crafts, especially if I get to use them in ritual afterwards. It's like a big bonus. And the other thing too, once you have your fire, assuming you have an actual fire, a really common thing that people will do is they will use the ash from the fire after the fact in their magic and in their spell work. It's said to be, again, another fertility charm. So I would highly recommend, after you have your fires, gathering up your ash. And you can either put it in a bowl or in a little bottle if you have those on your altar, and it will help superpower all the spells you do on your altar. Or you could just smear it on the altar if you want to. But a bowl or a bottle obviously is going to last a little bit longer. And it will, like I said, increase the fertility of your spells for like the whole year. And generally, when we talk about the Need fires and Beltane fires, there was always a sense of continuity, so it was the same, the ash from one fire would get put into the ash of the next fire, and the ash from that fire would move to the next fire. So there was this constant reuse. So the idea is that next year when Beltane comes, you'll put that ash in your fire, and then it will carry on to the next year again. Like I said, finally, and I put this on here because I want to talk about it, even though I know that it's not one of the social distancing friendly options, is maypole. So maypoles are what we used to do at my fairy festival, because the one time I didn't do a maypole, everybody kind of lost it and was freaking out that I didn't. So people are really into their maypole rituals. If you've never done a maypole, I'm guessing most people have, but if you've never done a maypole ritual, it's a giant pole sticks out of the ground, and you tie ribbons to the top. Sometimes there's a wreath with the ribbons attached. So, everyone does it a little differently. And there's a special dance that you do. Everybody holds the ribbons taut around the circle. And, I'll spare you the details of how it's done. But what it comes out as is this really pretty woven pattern. If you go onto my YouTube channel after this, there's actually going to be an image of a maypole on the video cover if you've never seen one before. That's really pretty. So follow me on YouTube. And and the idea is that, so you create this weaving. Like I said, it's common to use red and white ribbons. I know Jessica was asking me about that earlier. In these public rituals, we usually have a rainbow of colors. It's people usually bring their own, so it's whatever is there. Yes, maple. It is obviously really hard to do that right now because you have to be really close to people. I actually, in the ritual that I have in my shop, I created, it is actually a social distancing, social isolating, friendly version of a maypole that you can do that is safe. My Instagram just paused, which is the first time it's done it today. Instagram is back. Excellent. So it's a way to do a maypole, and it is totally kid-friendly, and it is appropriate for all ages, whether you're solitary, whether you're in a group, and is intended to be educational if there are children involved, and the wording is kind of, phrased in a way that is going to be give knowledge to anybody who's doing it. And of course, if you're doing it alone, you don't have to read everything out loud, but it can be a really great option. And then finally, and I think this is really important to mention, when we think about paganism as it once was forever ago, back when pagans literally meant country dweller, what all of the holidays had in common were kind of two big things. One, family. Two, food. Food is such a big part, even today, still a big part of all of our holiday gatherings. And every holiday seems to have its own menu that we commonly kind of draw on. So I think a big part of Beltane, even if you do nothing else, is you can make a special meal for yourself, or if you have kids, for your family, or if you don't have kids, for you and your spouse or your partner, or whatever term you like. If you are single and solitary, it could be as simple as Chips Ahoy or Pop-Tarts and some tea, or it could be as involved as doing a really big meal. I'm not sure if anybody is aware of this. It's one of those things that when you hear it, you're like, oh, well, duh, of course that makes sense. But maybe you're not familiar that, the concept of cakes and ale in our rituals is actually a callback to a time when that's what people did after a gathering or a religious or a spiritual gathering, is they enjoyed a meal together. So that's sort of an abbreviated version of the same concept. So if you're doing a big meal, you may or may not even need to do cakes and ale in your ritual. Um, so if you're doing it as a family, you could do something big and yummy and fun. Some common foods that people, now my husband says now he wants Chips Ahoy. Chips Ahoy are gross. They're crunchy. I just use that for example. If I buy Chips Ahoy, they're going to be the chewy ones at least. I said I might make chocolate chip cookies tomorrow. So just, hold your horses. So some traditional foods that are actually common to Beltane, not Chips Ahoy cookies. Although, again, if you have them and you like them, please use them. Oats, milk, butter, eggs. And I think it's important to note that those were the things that were common at that point in time because, hey, Slinky Girl 311, we were just talking about some foods that are common to Beltane gatherings, especially in times past. Oats, milk, butter, and eggs. And I think it's important to note that those are the foods that were common to the holiday because the harvest hadn't come yet and they didn't have access to produce the way that we do now, where we can just run up to the grocery store and buy strawberries, which are only in season in like July. So they were really forced to use what they had on hand already. And those were the things like the milk and the oats and the butter, things that were dairy related because all of the animals that started lactating, which if you are familiar with the holiday cycle, is associated with Imbolc, which is back in February. Ernest says fry bread. I don't remember what that's made out of, but I think any bread would technically, you could absolutely make an argument for anything with a grain in it, because grains were something that they could keep throughout the whole year in season, regardless of whether the harvest had come and gone or not. And some foods that were common to make with those things are things like puddings or custards. Also, wreath cakes. Wreaths were a really big part of. Oh, yes, I have had, Ernest is saying here that he's native himself. I've had fry bread, like indigenous like fry bread recipes, and it is amazing. Highly recommended. Super yummy. So yes, that would absolutely work. So wreaths were really, really big for Beltane. Like I said, they were frequently put at the top of the maypole. You can use your imagination that there was a wreath and the pole, what that might have suggested. I think too that they also represent the idea of like the cyclical nature of life and death and rebirth and all of those things. So wreath cakes, again, it's grain related, and they're sweet. You can make honey cakes, things like that. So those are some suggestions. So that's all that I have. So now that I've gotten all of that out of the way, does anybody have any questions or thoughts that they wanted to add? Oh, my tea is finally, like an hour later, starting to taste like cinnamon. Ooh, it's so weird. I can hear my husband's phone with my voice upstairs. Does anybody have maybe some Beltane plans already that they want to tell us what they are planning to do? That'd be fun. I'm actually planning on doing the ritual that I wrote because I think it's going to be really good for my kiddos. It has some, the amount of this that you would do obviously depends on, your children and, your situation, but it kind of has a little bit of shadow work in it. And I think that being in quarantine is a really good way to dredge up a lot of crap. So the ritual, I hope, will how to help them deal and cope with that a little bit. That's what I'm hoping anyway. So that should be fun. I'll take pictures and post them on the internet for everybody to enjoy. Hopefully other people do too. I would love to see what other people do to it too. I'm glad I didn't decide to do the Fairy Festival again this year. It would have been a total wash, and I'd be really scrambling now. There's a lot of events that have been canceled. and they're trying to figure out how to refund money to vendors or how they're going to do that. Because if you're not familiar, when event organizers charge vendors for their spaces, it's usually to pay for the rentals and for all the supplies. So usually that money by the time the event comes around is gone. So there's nothing to refund. So that's scary. So I'm glad I didn't dig myself into that hole. All right. Well, I don't see any questions. So real quick before I sign off, I just want to say that I am doing an Earth Week challenge on my Instagram and my Facebook right now. For every day that you participate, you can get an accumulative discount that will, so you'll get a discount code at the end of the week for off of whatever your purchase is in my shop. And I've got lots of different things in there. So by all means, go check it out. But even more than that, if you sign up for my email list, which on Instagram, it is linked in my profile. On Facebook, it is actually linked in the video description right here on this page. And on YouTube, you'll be able to find it in the comments below. When you sign up for my list, you will get a totally free gift from me, which is going to be a PDF of one of my favorite illustrations that's in the maypole, in the maypole wand Beltane ritual that I have on my website. And I'm really excited to give it to folks because I think it's really pretty, and I look forward to seeing what people do with it. So if you sign up for the email list, you will get one totally free, totally on me. So go sign up and check it out. All right. I am signing off. I hope you all have a wonderful Beltane. Next week, I am planning on... I'm trying to remember what I'm doing. I think I'm going to be doing my live stream on circle casting and the importance of circle casting and how to cast circles, so on and so forth. But the theme for the week is going to be protection. I'm also going to be starting a new thing on Instagram where I'm going to be posting a theme for the week. So if people want to post their own photos and hashtag them for that'd be cool. It's going to be, and I'll pick out pictures to reshare on my profile if I see them and I think they're really, really cool, which I imagine they will be because you guys are awesome. The theme for the week is going to be protection magic. So if you have any items that you regularly use or wear for protection, like jewelry or things that you use in your altar or that you hang from your rearview mirror or put over your front door, etc., I would love to see those. You can tag Ecstatic Earth Arts in those uploads, and I would love to see them and share them so other folks can see them. All right, everybody have a wonderful week. Stay safe. Have a happy Beltane. Take care.